Hi, and welcome to another episode of I Bought a Farm. So now what? Today is July 24th. We're out here at about 8:30 in the morning. We needed to do another grass inventory here toward the end of the week and another heifer check to see if we needed to move the heifers off of paddock 2 and bring them back down in here to paddock 1. Another thing that I've been thinking about quite a bit here in the last couple of weeks is to develop an overall plan for the rest of the fall for these heifers. Remember, our goal currently is to take these heifers to breeding, get them bred, and to sell them next spring as bred heifers. If the market turns sometime this fall, early winter, so that we can capture enough value, then we'll sell them before we breed them. But right now, the plan is to breed these heifers and sell them as bred replacements. I'm thrilled today to have some help with our grass inventory. Dr. Jimmy Henning, who by the way is the best forage specialist in the country, is here today, and he's going to go through the pastures with us. We're going to do a little evaluation of the species. We're going to look at the weeds and talk about weed control, and then we're going to go up to paddock 2, and he's going to tell me if I need to move these heifers out today or if we can give them another day or two. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the expert. Happy to introduce Dr. Jimmy Henning. Dr. Henning is one of our livestock forage specialists. And Jimmy works with beef cattle forage, works with the IRM group, works with equine and all large animal species as far as forage and forage management. We're happy to have Dr. Henning out here to do our grass inventory with us today. And Dr. Jimmy, we just kind of tooled through paddock 1 here. And what do you think? What do you, when you just look at the pasture, what do you see as far as your species, whether it's ready for grazing, what we need to do with these weeds? Just kind of give me an overview.
Sure. Well, thanks, Les, and it's a pleasure to be out and take a look at the farm and talk about what you do and assess the situation. And so as I got to the farm and you're looking at what you find, this is late July, and it's not unusual to find the weeds that we do find. You find some Johnson grass, some ironweed, chicory, Queen Anne's lace, wild carrot, and those are pretty showy. I mean, they're visual. So part of your head probably, or your thinking is, well, do I need to do something about the weeds? And it leads to one of the questions that you would probably have if you were just looking at this, and you'd say, how is my stand, and is it good? Is it do I need to do weed control? Do I mow before I graze? What do I do? Well, in general, it's always better whenever you're turning in, and we're standing in about, this is probably 12 to 18 inches worth of grass right here at the top of the hill, somewhat shorter back towards the barn. It's better to go ahead and turn in and let the cattle graze and let them sort out whether they're going to graze the grass, the clover, the weeds. There are some weeds that surprisingly the cattle like to eat quite a lot. Johnson grass, for example, they really like Johnson grass, and we have some in places here. They probably won't eat the ironweed, and that's okay. It's not taking up a lot of space, although we do know that ironweed, once it gets a hold in a pasture, can reduce yields enough that it's worth controlling. But that leads to a lot of other questions about, do I spray or not? So turn in, let the cattle come in and graze. They'll graze things like curly dock. They'll probably graze plantain. And then take this down and go from there. But I started talking about, what do I think of the grass stand, and keep it or not? What do you do with it? Well, frankly, the grass stand is really good. If you look down at your feet, you're going to find that the grass cover is pretty solid. And it leads me to one of the principles that I think is proven true over the years with forage management, and that is, it is nearly always better to try to deal with what you have than starting over. And I say that because starting over usually means some sort of a lack of production in a field. And it is that lack of production for a period of time that is the most expensive. I mean, we automatically think of maybe herbicide or seed as the expense of a reseeding, but when you do without income for that acre, that's a big expense, and it takes a long time to overcome that. So this farm, this is, as I think, a good strong forage base, bluegrass, tall fescue, orchard grass, and so it's, they've done a good job with fertilizing and getting it to come back. Now this is midsummer, and they've been off this paddock for 45 days. And that's a really important principle about grazing in midsummer. In the springtime, you could probably be back on this particular paddock after going through all the others in 20 days. You'll have enough to graze. When it's midsummer, that period of rest needs to stretch out long enough so that you get 12 to or so inches of grazable material here for the cattle. Does a couple of things. It helps the root systems and the crown of these cool season grasses replenish the root reserves. And we need that then to push up the new growth. That's where the new growth gets pushed up from. Another thing that happens, and we're just learning a lot more about the magnitude of it, is that when you leave some residual height, and we like to leave about 4 to 6 inches of base grass in a pasture, which is going to look wasteful, truthfully. It's going to look like you're wasting grass.
We talked about that in almost every paddock. It looks like there's a lot of grass there, but it's time to move.
It is time to move. And nearly always if you can rotationally graze, that is usually the first mistake, is that, by gosh, I can make them eat it all. I'm going to get 100% utilization. Well, the fact of the matter is it doesn't grow back that fast, and you've probably hurt your total annual yield. The second thing is, with our summertime temperatures in Kentucky and cool season forage bases, the crown of that plant gets really hot. And so the plant suffers a lot of times because it is hot, period. We may be doing without rain for periods of time, and then the crown gets hot on top of that. And it's one of the big reasons why we lose some of the really premium species like orchard grass.
We've got 23 heifers that will turn out here, just based upon the height and the thickness of this grass. Dr. Jimmy, I think we're going to be able to get 7 to 10 days out of it. What height do you think we should pull off this?
Oh, that is a really good question, and you got to kind of take into account a lot of things. Do you want regrowth after that or not? What time of the year is it? And typically on the cool season species like fescue and orchard grass, leaving it taller is better, 4 to 6 inches. Bluegrass, sometimes you can go lower because the leaves are lower and down in the crown. And so that's always a good rule of thumb for our cool season species. But one of the things that you're going to want to take into account is what happens next in this paddock. We are entering the period of time when we're thinking about fall grazing. And you probably talked about stockpiling and the need to do that. And one of the things you're going to want to make sure that you do is not to overgraze this paddock going into August. Because if you overgraze it and you want it to come back in the fall, those things don't work together. They just won't work no matter how you fertilize. So you want to leave that 4 to 6 inches even in July, August, so that when you put fertilizer down to stimulate the cool season grass, that it comes on.
Awesome. All right, let's go to paddock 2. Okay, Dr. Jimmy and I moved over to paddock 2. Remember that we're trying to figure out whether we need to move off from paddock 2, go over to paddock 1. If you'll recall from a few episodes ago, a few weeks ago now, or a couple of weeks ago now, we turned out onto this, and paddock 2 had 18 plus inches of extremely thick cool season grass. And we were really excited to get the opportunity to turn out. I wanted to turn out on it a little bit earlier, if you remember, but the neighbor's steers were having problems with the fence. And so we kind of got that figured out. This is where we are now. The heifers have done a really nice job of grazing on this. You can see right here, we've probably got six, maybe just a skosh more left here. But it's getting really close to time to turn them out. Dr. Jimmy, what do you think?
Well, I think this is a heck of a stand of grass. That's what I think. I mean, in fact, I didn't know what I might find when I got here today, but this is a lot thicker than I thought I'd find. So obviously, it tells you something. If you're looking at grass like this in July, that probably your soil is pretty deep right here.
Soil is deep.
Soil is deep right here, which is good. And you've looked at that before. That's where that web soil survey data really helps you, because especially when you're walking into a farm cold, you bought it. You don't have 20 years experience to know that this is the most productive field you have. But obviously this one is really good. The cattle have done a remarkable job of almost like a mowing machine, coming in here and taking this off and taking off the leaves. And yeah, Les, you say there's a lot of grass left here, but yet on the other hand, this time of year, it's better to err on the side of leaving a little more than you think.
If I roll them out Monday, probably pretty good. Take them over to paddock 1 on Monday.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, you've probably talked about grazing math before, but you know, the thing that's going through my mind is, okay, you got, how many did you say? 7?
There's 23 heifers here. Yep.
Well, you know, you take their body weight and multiply it by 2 or 3%, and that's how much they're going to eat a day. And then you got to figure out how much grass do I have standing here, and figure out, well, how much will it hurt if we stay in here that many more days? So you can do the math, and for grass this thick, you would expect about 200 pounds per acre of dry matter per inch, grazable inch. So you can just do the math and figure out, you know, if it all looks like this, will I have enough grass to get to Monday?
That's good. I'll do the math when we get done out here today, and we'll put it as part of the video.
Good.
And we'll figure out if I need to come back out and move them today or move them on Monday.
There you go. Sounds good.
So we're standing here in paddock 2, right in the weed patch. Okay, remember this is where the tobacco patch was. Up on the east end, we have really good grass. Down here on the west end, we have really good grass. But right here in the middle, there's nothing. I mean, there's nothing but weeds. I can't get a heifer to eat a weed to save my neck. So Dr. Jimmy, you've seen this situation and you see what our problem is here. What do you think we ought to do about this?
Well, it's really baffling why you'd have this kind of space. Obviously the soils are not different, you know, here just between these two areas of really good grass. So it does raise the question, what do you do? And in a previous segment, we talked about the fact that it's nearly always better to manage and try to bring back and renovate or resurrect what you have than starting over because of the expense. But in this case, this is a really vivid example of on your right, tremendous stand of grass, you know, something obviously worth keeping. And on the left side, or to your left, my right, is going to be, as Les describes it, a weed patch. Now, in some ways, the visible weeds, which would be the Queen Anne's lace, are not worse than other places on the farm, but there just is not that base stand of cool season grass or grass in general that you'd like to have. And so we're in July. Anytime you start thinking about, you know, redoing something, you got to think about when your next seeding windows are for the species you want to use. So being July, we do have time to come in here and till this, or if you want to use Roundup and kill off the standing vegetation. And then you can seed in what you want to put in here to match the rest of either a cool season grass or think about maybe something else. Another idea is to, again, thinking about adding a warm season component to a pasture, is next spring to add crabgrass. And just thinking a little longer and right off the cuff here, because you've got, you know, this is 6 months between, well, more than 6. It's almost well, say 10 months between now and when you might seed crabgrass in May next year, um, then what might you do to try to get some production off of this field or a field like it? You could, again, take out the weeds with a spray of Roundup or tillage and use a small grain or something like that to come in and give you some production to cover up the ground. And it puts you in a really good shape to put the crabgrass in the spring. So there are a lot of options depending on the year, but this is just, I thought, too good of an example not to point out of this is over here, manage it. You know, you got a good start. You don't need to change anything in terms of the base, but over here, some changing would be good.
We moved down to the south end of paddock 2 to find the heifers, and of course, they're buried in the trees. I mean, I don't blame them. It's going to be another scorcher. Heat stress has been a real issue the last few weeks here in Kentucky. If you've been anywhere around Kentucky, you know that our heat indexes have been near triple digits for quite a while. And so our heifers have been really seeking shade, needing shade, and they're in shade. And I'll show you where they are. You can see they found themselves right here in a nice cool part. It's about, I'd say, 10 degrees cooler under this canopy than it is out here in the sun where Dr. Jimmy and I are at. Just a quick overview. I mean, again, you know, we look at how they're flipping their ears to give us an indication of our fly control and their fly issues. Not one ear flipping, okay? So our fly spray is still doing a really nice job. There's one heifer right there. I'm not sure if you can see her as well as I can. Kind of got her head down just a little bit. She's one of those heifers that's not quite finished shedding out yet. And so she's experienced a little bit more heat stress. Her respiration rate's a little bit higher. And so, you know, that's one of the issues that we have with the hair coat that we've been talking about, is that we've got to get their coats off of them so that they're not going through winter or going through the summer with their winter coat on. And Dr. Jimmy, we came down here on the south side of this paddock, and the heifers are buried in the canopy. Do you blame them?
No, not at all. In fact, that's where I'd like to be standing right now.
Yeah, you're dropping a little sweat on me.
Oh yeah, I'm telling you, too soft. But it makes you think. You mentioned heat stress, and it makes me think of the fact that fescue is a grass with some strong benefits for our system, but it's got some negatives that you need to really be aware of. And I'm holding a fescue plant because I want to talk about something called the endophyte of tall fescue. Now, endophyte's just a fancy word for in the plant. It is a fungus. The endophyte is a fungus that grows inside the plant, stays most of its life right down here at the base of the plant, and we can stain it and see it under a microscope. But what it does when it grows in the plant is it produces compounds that help it be tough and resilient, but it also produces compounds that make the veins on cattle and other things constrict at the extremities, and so they get abnormally hot for the temperatures that they're experiencing.
Yeah, our heat stress, we've measured cattle in July in Kentucky with body temperatures exceeding 108.
Wow.
And their normal temperature is 102.3 Fahrenheit. And so gain is drastically reduced, fertility is drastically reduced. Our heat stress is really a huge issue. On these videos, and I know you've seen them, I spend a lot of time every single video talking about hair coat, you know, because I haven't really talked about it in enough depth, but the endophyte impacts hair coat. Cattle that are grazing fescue that's high in endophyte, that's got producing a lot of alkaloids, when the blood shunts away from the exterior of the body, the biological triggers necessary for shedding hair leave. Okay, and so part of our issue with these heifers is not all genetic, and it's not management. Quite a bit of it is grass, and the fact that they're eating highly infected endophyte fescue.
And I mentioned that it's one of the reasons the endophyte fescue is one of the reasons why it is such a persistent grass, and we want persistence. So it leads you right to the question of, my gosh, well, then what should I do? This stuff is toxic. Well, in a way, yeah, but it's been a salvation of Kentucky's land since the 50s of the last century, right? So here's what you do. It would be good to know what the endophyte level is in this field, and you can test it, and we can tell you that. But we know historically that about fields are typically 80% infected with tall fescue, the endophyte of tall fescue. So it's not a bad assumption. You see the cattle maybe in the trees or seeking to get cool earlier than you think they might. Not a bad assumption. So what do? The number one remedy or way to alleviate the symptoms is to add clover to this pasture. And if you look down at the grass, we've been talking about how good it is to have thick grass for a while, but it is one of those things that we may want to think about changing if you want to get clover to get started here, because it is so thick that you've got no room for anything else to grow. So getting clover into this paddock would be something you'd want to do. We're going to stockpile this winter and graze through these fields probably, and that can leave them open and where you can put clover in February, and we're able to frost seed clover then and make that work. Another thing that you can do is to avoid it during the worst times of the year, and that would be during the hotter times. So you having another place to go, a different kind of forage base, that's going to be good. Keeping it vegetative. We know that the leaves have less of the toxin than, for example, the lower parts of the plant or the seed heads. So the better job we do keeping the plants leafy and rotationally grazing, the more we're going to lighten the load of the toxin on the cattle. And if you really want to take care and replace this field, that's the fourth option. But by and large, our most common approach is to A, put clover in it, and B, just rotationally graze so you're looking at leaves.
Yeah, everybody thought I was a little bit crazy, and I don't know about crazy, but stupid sometimes. But anyhow, when we had some of our cool seasons got pretty mature in paddocks 3 and 4 before we moved down there, and I had the farm owner take the tops off of them.
Right.
And the main reason was to get rid to reduce our endophyte infection levels and to stimulate a little bit more, honestly, of the leafy growth. So if we take that top off, and it looked terrible for the first couple of days, but it ended up being incredible. And I was just trying to get away from those seed heads, because in my mind, seed heads are always a bad thing.
And we know that I told you the leaves are the least toxic. Seed heads are next, and that right there is just glow in the dark toxic.
Yeah.
So when we overgraze a paddock and they're having to get down into this, they are loading up on the toxin. So that grazing management is one of our key tools to deal with tall fescue, including the mowing, timely mowing.
I came out Monday of this week, and it was hotter Monday at this time of day than it is today, and the heifers really weren't showing super signs of heat stress, so I was really very tickled. So I mean, we know this is mostly fescue up here, but I think the endophyte levels just right here in this paddock are a little bit lower than down there in paddock 3 and paddock 4, just based upon the biology of the heifers. They don't seem to be quite as heat stressed.
Sweet. That's good.
All right, I'm gonna run into the timber here and do a head count. They're all in there. There's not gonna be any good video, so I'm not even gonna turn it on. Just do a quick head count to make sure everybody's here, because you're not a good cattleman if you're not keeping track of what's going on. So if everybody's here and nobody's got any pink eye or anything, then Dr. Henning and I will go down and talk about paddock 3 and paddock 4, and then we'll wrap this bad boy up. Okay, Dr. Jimmy and I moved down here by paddock 4. We kind of breezed through paddock 3 just a little bit on the way over. Main goal was just to look and see how our regrowth is going, and we're trying to make a plan for what we're going to do all the way through the fall. As the breeding specialist, reproductive specialist, The cattle that I like to deal with most as far as trying to get them to conceive are fall calving cattle that are grazing stockpiled fescue in November and December. And so to maximize our conception rate and our ability to get these heifers pregnant, I would like to have a plan that maximizes our ability to utilize stockpiled fescue. And so Dr. Jimmy's going to help us with a little bit with that plan today, and he and I will probably talk about it a little bit more in the next couple weeks, and I'll share those discussions with you on the future episodes. But right now, we're just going to talk about what this regrowth looks like. If you guys remember, those of you that've been watching this series, we pulled off of paddock 3 about it'll be 2 weeks now, 2 weeks ago. And we pulled off of paddock 4 about a month ago, just short of a month. And the species that we saw when the grass was headed out and tall was orchard grass, fescue, a little bit of red clover, and a little bit of vetch. So Dr. Henning, what do you think about our regrowth and how we're going to be able to utilize these 2 paddocks here for the rest of our grazing season?
Well, you got to be tickled with where you are going into August with the amount of growth you've got on the paddocks in general, especially these last 2. And I think it goes back to the rest you've been able to give it. I mean, 2 weeks, 4 weeks rest is crucial, or a little even longer in the summer. But also we've gotten some rain. So the fact that it's been hot has not, hurt us terribly bad. But as we look forward to the fall, and with the things you want to do, and trying to make your pasture system work great in the fall, we want to look at what do we do here, how much do we graze off, and then what do we do in August. And the key in any summer situation with cool season species is never to take it very low. But with stockpiling, on the horizon, and adding, and stockpiling is just setting aside pasture and letting it regrow for taking later. Okay, so we're just stockpiling. So we want to think about, when are we going to put some fertilizer on? What are we going to put on for fertilizer? And then how do we utilize this? And the best time for the return on pounds of dry matter per pound of nitrogen applied is going to be starting around mid-August. And that's often a challenge for us, and who knows what August is going to look like weather-wise in Kentucky. But oftentimes it's dry. And so we're wondering, is it going to pay or not to put the nitrogen on? But, that's probably beyond my pay grade. The thing I do want to say is, when you've got this much growth, and then the chances for regrowth and chances for getting an economic return on nitrogen application is much greater. So what do you put on and how much? Around, in that mid-August period, nitrogen is what we need on these pastures, around 50 to 60 actual pounds of nitrogen per acre. That's in the 125 to 150 pounds of urea per acre on these pastures. One of the things we know about urea, and that's the form that nitrogen comes in fertilizer, is that we tend to lose a little bit due to volatility of the urea in those hot summer times. So ideally, if you could, to time the fertilizer application so that the rain is coming soon after, then you're typically going to get almost all of the nitrogen you've applied, the benefit from it. So that's the key thing, is that a timing of nitrogen, getting it on, hopefully you've got some rain, and leaving then, and then making sure that it's not overgrazed going into that August period.
What do you think about the weeds in these 2 pastures? I mean, you see some chicory, you see some Queen's Anne, and that what you called it?
Yeah, Queen Anne's lace.
Yeah, Queen Anne's lace, yeah. Is it serious enough that we ought to take a bush hog on the highest setting and just take the tops off of it, or just, what do you think?
Well, that's a good question, and I would say there's probably not a perfect answer for that, but one of the things that I would do if this were mine, and I'm looking at it, and first of all, my base stand of grass is good, so I'm not worried about removing the weeds for that. are the seed heads or the stalk standing up, and are they causing me some problems? And chances are, at the stage they're in, maybe not, probably not. But you may want to, after you've grazed through this paddock one more time, to knock down the seed heads, and that's always good for suppression. But chances are these are the weeds that we're looking at are more perennials than annuals, and so it's going to be cosmetic more than it will be economic for you to do so. It did remind me though, and I'm glad you mentioned weeds. I can see a little patch of Johnson grass out here, and Johnson grass in this paddock is a minor player right this minute because the cattle have grazed it. But when we're in that period of frost, where we're beginning to get those light frosts, you want to be conscious of how much Johnson grass you have and where it is. I would say I wouldn't worry about small patches, that are short, but big patches may cause some toxicity because we know that right after Johnson grass is frosted for the first time, or before it's killed, then it releases cyanide. And we can, if there is nothing else to graze, we can have some toxicity and lose cattle from cattle grazing frosted Johnson grass.
Yeah, we got particularly over in paddock 1, you saw some pretty large patches of Johnson grass.
Pretty large
that
patches
were
of
seeded out and little bit different. So we'll definitely have to take care of that before it gets close to frost. But think we got enough grass to stretch through the summer?
Oh, you're good. I mean, choosing the stocking rate, you did a great job.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Jimmy.